Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Hey, many of you know if you follow the podcast, I am a zoo lover. And as I travel across the United States and around the world, every time I get the opportunity to visit a new zoo, I take the opportunity to do so. And at a recent visit to a zoo in my travels, I was introduced to an animal I had never had an opportunity to see before. That animal was called the Dunnart. Now, the Dunnart is a small, fat tailed, mouse like marsupial that's native to the country of Australia. Interestingly enough, it's among the smallest of all the marsupials in the world. Now, it's a member of the family Dasyuridae, and the Dunnart, believe it or not, is relative to the Tasmanian devil. Now, this particular species of animals and their relatives are known for their ability to be able to store energy, literally food reserves, in their tail. Now, the Dunnart is a nocturnal creature, essentially active during the nighttime. It primarily eats insects, but it could also eat small lizards, amphibians like frogs, as well as crickets, spiders, and beetles. Now, if you do have an opportunity to visit the land down under, you're going to find the Dunnart in various habitats all across Australia. You'll find them in the desert sandhills, you'll find them in the tropical savannas, and you'll find them in the deep, lush forest of Australia. Now, these small marsupials often live in hollow logs, or they'll make their home or their abode under the rocks. Again, being nocturnal, they're active at night, and as they eat, and they eat in abundance during the nighttime hours, the energy reserves not used for today are stored in their tails, and as they eat, their tails get fatter and fatter and fatter. Now, why does it do that? Because during times of hibernation, again, think bear, but smaller. During times of hibernation or during times of food scarcity, their bodies can literally feed off the reserve energy, that additional fat stored in their tail, sustaining them while they're sleeping or during times when food is not readily available. Now, again, I mentioned that the Dunnart is a marsupial, and because it's a marsupial, female Dunnarts raise their young in their pouch. I found it interesting as the conver I can't even talk today. As the conservationist was telling me that you can have up to 5 to 8 offspring anytime a female Dunnart gives birth. Now, the thing she told me next really surprised me, and she said this: the Dunnarts are famous in the animal kingdom as having the world's shortest gestation period. Get this, only 11 days. Now think about that. From the time of conception until a mother Dunnart is giving birth to 5 to 8 babies, that's less than 2 weeks, just over a week and a half, and she's giving birth. Is there any wonder why this is one of the more prolific characters that we see as we visit the country of Australia? Now, contrast that with, on the same zoo visit, I got an opportunity to also spend some time up close and personal with the world's largest land animal, the African elephant. Now, again, I was spending some time with one of the conservationists on staff, and she was telling me there's two distinct species of the African elephant. There's the larger African savanna elephant, which was the animal that I was with as I was at the zoo, and then there was the smaller African forest elephant. But again, these are two of the largest land mammals on the face of the earth. Now, she went on to share with me that the African elephants, as a group, tend to live highly social lives, but they're led by a matriarch, a mother who controls the herd. Now, females lead the family unit, but the male elephants live solitary lives, and typically they live apart from the herd. Once those baby elephants grow and they reach maturity, they go out on their own, spending most of their lives living a solitary life. Now, these elephants, these African elephants, are distinguished from their Asian counterparts because of their large fan-shaped ears, which they use to help cool their bodies. Now, the other thing I learned about these gentle giants, again, being one of the largest land animals in the world, these gentle giants can reach up to 13 feet tall and can weigh up to 11 tons. Now, the savanna elephants, again, this was interesting, they have outward curving tusks, but the forest elephant has a straighter, shorter tusk that points directly downward. The other thing I found interesting, unlike other species of animals, both the males and the females can have tusks. Now, African elephants are by nature herbivores, not carnivores. And get this, they devour up to 350 pounds of vegetation every single day. Now, their diet in the wild consists mostly of grasses, leaves, fruit, and bark. Now, another thing I learned from spending time at the zoo and talking to the conservationists, they were telling me that the African elephants actually make a significant contribution to the ecosystem where they live. They create watering holes as they dig in riverbeds during the dry season. And then when the water comes in and then the water begins to recede, those watering holes retain water longer, which benefits other animals that are searching for water when water is scarce. Now, the other thing I learned about these African elephants is they serve as what I would call a mega gardener. Now, how are they mega gardeners? Well, with what they eat, they spread plant and tree seeds through their dung as they traverse across the landscape. The other thing they do that helps contribute to their ecosystem is as they walk, they clear pathways, very wide, easy to navigate pathways. And what does this do? It provides a network of interconnecting trails in the process. You know, the conservationist I was with, she said, think of it as an interstate highway system for animals. Now, one other thing I'm going to point out about the African elephant, you may or may not know it, African elephants are also famous in the animal kingdom for having the longest gestation period, an average of 22 months. Now, think about that. From conception until birth, a female elephant is going to carry that child, that young elephant, for almost 2 years. Now, by contrast, the human gestation period averages only around 9 months. Now, the human gestation period is divided into 3 trimesters, and each one of those trimesters involves a unique and significant stage of growth, both for the developing baby and for the mother. Now, the first 12 weeks, that first trimester, is characterized by a rapid development of the major body systems. This is a process known as organogenesis. And it's during this process of organogenesis that all the major organs and body systems, including the brain, the spinal cord, the heart, the digestive system, and the lungs, begin to form. Now, around week 5 or 6, the heart begins to beat spontaneously. Tiny limbs start to appear and later grow into arms and legs with fingers and toes. The eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth also start to form in this first trimester of life. Now, scientifically, this is the stage where a fertilized embryo begins the process of transformation into what we scientifically refer to as a fetus. Now, during the second trimester, the fetus, this growing baby, begins to experience rapid growth. Organogenesis accelerates as the various body systems that were being formed in the first trimester begin to mature during the second trimester. The kidneys and the liver begin to function. The skeletal system starts to harden. A greasy white protective coating known as the vernix caseosa and a fine downy hair called the lanugo begins to cover the skin as it begins to prepare the skin for its birth into the world. Now, interestingly enough, it's during this second trimester the maturing baby in the womb can now hear and distinguish sounds. It can recognize its mother's and father's voice, and the baby can even open its eyes in the womb. The mother carrying this infant can now detect the gentle flutters as the baby, this fetus, starts to move. This baby is now large enough that the growing baby within is visible to an outside observer. Why? Because this growing infant has outgrown the pelvic cavity and the mother's belly begins to protrude. And then in the final trimester, the baby in the womb begins to experience another significant growth spurt as it finalizes preparation for life outside the womb. It's during this third trimester that the lungs complete development, even as the brain begins to rapidly transform and begins the wiring process that will continue for years even after the baby is born. Now, the baby's body begins to add extra layers of fat under the skin because that is going to allow the baby to regulate its body temperature after it's born. Coordinated reflexes like sucking and blinking and grasping are further refined as the baby begins to rotate into a head down position as it prepares for delivery. And then at some point during the third trimester, the mother goes into labor. Muscles begin to constrict to help her push the baby through the birth canal, expelling it from the womb and into the outside world. Now, in this 9-month deliberate, highly intentional process, think about what's just happened. A baby goes from a single-celled organism to an embryo, to a fetus, to ultimately become one of the most complex multiple cellular creatures in the world, a living human baby. This is what happens during gestation. But what's the purpose of gestation? And you may say, John, why in the world are we talking about babies when this is a leadership and personal growth process? Well, I'm glad you asked the question. Let me lean in and explain where we're going. Simply put, the purpose of gestation is to provide a period of development for a fetus inside a mother's body. It's during this period that the mother's body provides the nutrients, the oxygen, and the waste removal for this developing fetus as it undergoes that growth process from a fertilized egg to a viable offspring. All along the way, key milestones, including the formation of the nervous system, the digestive system, the circulatory system, the respiratory system, and the skeletal system, all these milestones happen during these 3 trimester periods as this baby goes from a single-celled organism to a massive multicellular, incredible, amazing creation, a human life. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the gestation process is about preparing an offspring for sustainable life outside the womb. So again, you may say, John, why all the talk about babies? Well, it's not so much about babies, but getting you thinking about the concept of gestation. This leads to an all-consuming question I want to lean in and I want to talk about for just a few moments in today's podcast. And I want to ask this question. What's birthing inside of you? Do you find yourself potentially pregnant with possibility? What thoughts, what ideas, what beliefs, what products or services or innovation are going through a gestation process inside of you right now? What is it, this incredible idea that you can't let go of? What is it that's growing inside of you that's waiting to go through this gestation process, this developmental process, so that ultimately this idea, this concept, this dream that you have can be birthed into its physical representation in the earth? Now, I want you to think about this concept of gestation from the concept of not a baby, but an idea being born. Let me give you an example from someone you probably know and someone I admire, and that's Thomas Edison. Now, Thomas Edison understood the concept of gestation as he sat one day pondering in his warehouse. This warehouse was dimly lit by gas fixtures, very inefficient, very ineffective at lighting the workplace. As he looked outside the windows, he saw these same gas lanterns placed along the roads and along the highways, very dimly lighting or attempting to light the pedestrian walkways and the roads that people traveled at night. Now, Thomas Edison had recently discovered direct current electricity. This was a new creation for him, and as Edison began to dwell on the idea of what can I do with this discovery of direct current, he began to think, what can we do with electricity? And as he began to think, an idea came to his mind. And that idea began to envision into a vision, an image where he could see electricity rather than gas being used to illuminate homes and offices around the country. Now, I love the idea that he's forward thinking and trying to figure out what's next in this innovative process. And as Edison began to deliberate and think through this process, he began to realize that no longer would families go to bed, fearing they might not wake up in the morning if those gas-powered lights in their home had a flicker or had some type of disruption in the gas flow that snuffed out the flame, and then the gas began to flow, filling the homes with invisible gas and smothering the sleeping residents. No longer would individuals have to go to work and worrying about getting ready to light a lantern, not knowing that that lantern had not been fully turned off and the warehouse was full of gas, leading to an explosion from a lit match. Now, as Edison began to dream and begin to envision this idea of using electricity to light the world around him, Edison began to envision city streets, no longer dimly lit by inefficient, ineffective gas lanterns, but rather brilliantly illuminated by efficient electric-powered lights. In his mind, he saw that this would make the sidewalks safer for the pedestrians that walked the sidewalks at night. It would make the roadways safer for the people that were moving up and down in their horse-drawn carriages or their bicycles or however they traversed the highways at night. His concept of using direct current to create a light source could literally revolutionize how the world operated once the sun went down. And oh, by the way, it could make him a lot of money in the process. So as Edison began to marinate on these ideas, these thoughts that he was having, an embryo of an image began to form in his mind. So Edison began to think about how various metals, when combined and heated, would begin to glow and give off light as a byproduct. So quickly, what did he do? He began to sketch, he began to calculate, and he began to inventory what resources would be required to take this thought, this idea, this embryo of something waiting to be birthed inside of him from nothing more than an image or a thought or an idea, into bringing that into a physical working prototype. So the idea of the incandescent light bulb was being birthed in that moment by Thomas Edison. Now, as Thomas and his team continued to work on the concept, this embryo of an idea began to take shape. Like a baby forming in the womb, this idea began to grow, it began to expand, and it began to take on a life of its own. Through trial and error over thousands of attempts and thousands of failures, Edison and the team allowed this idea to germinate, to grow, to develop, to mature. And as this gestation process continued, it moved them closer every single day toward a viable offspring. Well, where others had tried and failed, had similar ideas but were unable to give birth to it, Edison and his team stayed patient with the process. And in 1879, they were able to take a carbonized cotton thread filament, add electricity to it, and that carbonized cotton thread filament stayed lit for 14 and a half hours. So on December 31st, the end of 1879, Thomas Edison held a public demonstration at his laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey. And with the throw of a switch, he lit up the grounds around his laboratory with his new incandescent light bulbs. So what had happened? The process of gestation was completed and the incandescent light bulb was born. Now, Edison didn't stop there. He went on to duplicate this process of gestation again and again. And when we think about what was perhaps the most prolific inventor of modern history, he went on to follow this same gestation process, and he created the phonograph, or what today we would call the record player. He created the phonographic record itself. He created the motion picture projector, the carbon microphone. He invented cement. He invented the mimeograph, the early iterations of a copier. He invented the stock market ticker tape. He invented the fuel cell. He invented storage batteries, among his many, many inventions. Now, Edison was not alone in this process in understanding the value of taking an idea through the gestation process so that idea could ultimately be birthed into its physical representation in the earth. Take Nikola Tesla, who invented alternating current. What about Madame Curie, who discovered radium? What about Phileo Farnsworth, who discovered the electric television? What about Mary Anderson, who invented the windshield wiper? And of course, don't forget the Wright brothers who created the airplane, Alexander Graham Bell who created the telephone, Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity, William Kellogg who brought us cereal, Carl Benz who brought us the very first automobile, and Henry Ford who brought us the very first electronic ignition system. Every single one of these individuals experienced a gestation period in their lives as they took their ideas from a thought to a viable physical solution. Now, some of those ideas were birthed quickly, like a Dunnart. Others took time, like an elephant. But every one of those ideas, as those inventors, those creators, were patient in the process, allowing the gestation period to do what it does, and that's fully formed the idea into its physical representation. They brought innovation that literally changed the world. Now, let's fast forward to the current era where we are today. Think about companies like Microsoft, like Oracle, like Tesla, like NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, OpenAI, Anthropic, Dell, Adobe, and I could go on with other tech giants. Every one of these major players in the tech world today, guess what? Every single one of those also started as an embryo of an idea in the mind of the founder. And every single one of these companies went through a birthing process before these organizations became the behemoths that they were today. They started as an idea, they grew, and once they were fully developed, they were revealed to the world, and just like a baby, they continued to grow and mature over time. Now, think about that in terms of where we are today. If we think about these companies and these inventors and the ideas going on inside of your head, remember, some of these ideas, the gestation period was relatively fast. But for some of these other companies, some of these other organizations, some of these other inventions throughout history, those ideas had to stay in the womb much, much longer before they were fully formed and could see the light of day. So I want you to think about this, and it's a topic I bring up often. Everything begins with a thought. And if everything begins with a thought, what's the purpose of a thought? Well, a thought is where ideas are born. It's where ideas are fertilized, just like a human embryo, an elephant embryo, a Dunnart embryo, or any other animal embryo. When those ideas are fertilized with action, they begin to take on a life of their own. And it's during the gestation process that those ideas are carried and nurtured and cared for by their founder. That person is you with the ideas that are growing inside of you right now. And just like these inventors, just like these tech giants, just like the individuals I've talked about, once those ideas are fully formed, fully prepared, they come into the light and they're ready to be revealed to the world. So if everything starts as a thought, it begs a very important question. What are you thinking? And more importantly, what thought, what idea, what concept, what product, what service, or what solution to a problem or an answer to a question is floating around right now in the recesses of your mind, waiting for that idea to be fertilized with action so the gestation process can begin? What thoughts, what beliefs, what ideas that you've taken action on are going through a gestation process right now? I guess the really big question is this: what's growing inside of you, waiting to be birthed into its physical representation, waiting to be coming into the light and to be revealed to the world? Now, you got to remember, the gestation process varies depending on what's growing inside. If your idea is a Dunnart, that's one of those small ideas that can come to its physical representation very, very quickly. But those big ideas, those big, hairy, audacious goals that we've heard about, that we've dreamed about, those massive, giant dreams that are Mount Everest size, it's going to take a little longer for those ideas to go from fertilization through the maturation process that happens during gestation to ultimately come into its physical representation so it can come into the light and be revealed to the world. So maybe that idea you got lurking around in your head right now is a Dunnart, and it's something you can bring to fruition very quickly. Or maybe, just maybe, the idea that's growing inside of you right now is an elephant-sized idea. And if it's an elephant-sized idea, I hate to tell you this, it's going to take some time for the gestation process to finish so that it can be revealed to the world, because what's growing inside of you may be bigger than you realize. Did you get that? That idea inside of you may be an elephant, an idea so big that it's going to take some time for that idea to be fully developed so that when it's revealed to the world, it's revealed for this massive, incredibly big, incredibly powerful idea that it is. Now, it's also important to remember this: the gestation period is going to be uncomfortable. Look at any woman that's going through childbirth. And my wife has given birth to multiple children. We have 6 children in our home. And as I think about the process that she went through with each birth, at times it was painful. And as she's going through that delivery process, at the end of the gestation period, that's when it's the most painful at all. But once that child was birthed, all of a sudden, all the pain and all the discomfort in the mind of my wife and I, it was worth it. And the same can be said for the idea that's birthing inside of you. That idea that's growing inside of you, that's going through the gestation process, that's taking on a life of its own, that is growing, that's expanding, that's developing, that's maturing, that's getting ready to come into the light of the day and to be revealed to the world. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some resources, and it's going to take some patience. But once that idea is fully developed and it comes into the light and it's revealed to the world, here's what I'm here to tell you. You're going to look back and you're going to say, it was worth the time, it was worth the energy, it was worth the effort, it was worth the discomfort, it was worth the struggle, and it was worth the pain. But let me remind you of this. When it comes to giving birth to an idea, we can't rush the process. 9 months to birth a baby, 11 days to birth a Dunnart, or if we're talking about an elephant, up to 2 years to birth an elephant. When it comes to an idea, we've got to give that idea time to be fully developed so that when it is revealed in the light and it steps into the world, it's viable and it can stand on its own and be sustainable. So again, we can't rush the process, but you and I can be patient in the process. So let me leave you with this. If you find yourself with an idea that keeps showing up, that keeps getting bigger, an idea that keeps getting clearer and more defined in your thinking, congratulations, you're pregnant with possibility. So let me ask you this as I wrap up. What's that $1 million idea? What's that life-changing innovation? What's that solution to a problem or an answer to a question people around you are looking for that nobody's been able to find, that's growing and developing inside of you? What is it that's birthing inside of you, waiting to be revealed to the world so that it can show up, show out, and reveal to the world the fact that you have been birthing something great? Hey, I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. I want to say thanks for joining me. Have a great day.